bet on to win the Grand Prix. So don't want to be let down now. Frank is on an Obzon deck here.
And it looks like Darwin is on Mardu. When you think of Mardu, you think of an aggressive deck, so we'll see if he's trying to get out of the gate very quickly here. Again, Frank does have Grand Prix champion ×2. He is quite the limited player. He's making a name for himself in limited.
Yeah, Frank is definitely right now part of, you can say it's Obzon, but this is a 5-color deck. He's got 9 non-basics here.
Jeez.
Running, if you look at the multicolor part of his list, he's running nearly every card in that section of his pool.
Both players are going to start off here with a wind-scarred Crag, and while it may seem as though they're red-white decks, chances are it's anything but that, as here's a Master of Pearls face up from Kastle.
Well, Darwin is a player who made his name attacking with red creatures. Mardu does seem up his alley in the same way that these dual lands would be in Frank's.
That is a little bit surprising. Jungle Hollow there from Skarren. He's at 22. Master of Pearl's an incredibly powerful card. It's going to come across here for 2 and put Frank down to 20. But when you unmorph that thing, chances of you winning are very high, as Kastle is going to play a morph and pass the turn back.
Actually, so I like what Kastle's done here. Master of Pearls is a card that on the face looks incredible. And when I've been playing with it, I've had him play a couple times, I actually felt that the card was a little overrated. There's a lot of ifs that have to be satisfied. Then, you know, you have to have a bunch of creatures and 5 mana and a board where that's profitable. I think that's good, and sometimes he's good, but he's not just generically good to flip up. Whereas against the 5-color deck, as we saw last round, sometimes the best thing you can do is just play a 2/2 for 2. I mean, when your opponent's starting off on red-white duel into black-green duel, well, you kind of know his archetype already.
Yeah. And one of the nice things, too, is that, you know, it's the versatility of the card, right? You might look at Master of Pearls and say, this is always a morph, and this is my plan, which is to unmorph it, and I'm going to get you and blow you out in combat. While that's probably what's going to happen with that card a high percentage of the time, there's no rule or set in stone that says you have to morph that on turn 3 and unmorph it later. You can play as a 2/2 and get the beatdowns going, and that's exactly what Kastle has done this game.
I think that's actually really interesting about a lot of the morphs that we've seen in this set. So if you look back to Onslaught Block, there were a lot of morphs that really the correct thing was to always morph them. You know, especially the ones from later sets, the ones that had abilities when they flipped up, your Echo Tracers, you just always morphed. I think every creature right now that they're printing, it's an actual decision onto whether morph it or not.
Well, that is really good Arc Lightning, because that took down a Sagu Mauler, dealt 1 to Skarren, and let Kastle get in for 4 points of damage. Now, there's always this little game, right? What's the first morph that they're going to play? Is it their good morph or is it their bad morph? Do they even have a choice on what morph to play? Well, Frank's going to play another morph. Is this one as good as Sagu Mauler? That would be difficult. But I suppose it's possible, as Frank is going to play a Rugged Highlands and gain another life here. So he's getting his mana online and his colors online, but one of his best cards, maybe even the best card in his deck in Sagu Mauler, well, that's in the graveyard now.
Yeah, I don't want to understate how good these life gain lands are. Frank is at 16 instead of 13 thanks to them, and that is not a trivial amount of life.
It's actually kind of crazy. I've been thinking about that as I've been watching these games unfold, where you would think the opponent would be lower. As you said, you would think that Frank would be at 13, and it's like, it's just gain a life. Is that really that good? Well, if your deck is trying to make it into the late game and you play 3 of these in the opening turns of the game, yeah, gaining 3 life is pretty gosh darn good.
You know, what I think is actually interesting about the build that Skarren has gone for is that he doesn't have a huge number of game-ending bombs here. You know, you see the Sagu Mauler in the graveyard. He has a lot of value. Cards like Armament Core, Mardu, Heart Piercer, Arc Lightning, these are all in Frank's deck, but he doesn't have the Dune Blasts, you know, these, like the Dune Blasts, the Anafenzas, the kind of things that you'd expect him just to be wrecking the game with.
And Hostilities type card, something like that. He's not even, he does have 1 white mana there from the Windscarred Crag. Let's see what he's got for 5 mana here now. All right, so there is the core, and this is, boy, is this a good card. Kastle's going to take a look, and we're going to do the same. I like this card a lot.
Well, it does pretty much a lot of the things that you'd want it to do. It's a 4/4 for 5, which is actually really big in this set. On top of that, its ability when it comes into play, Common Bond has always been a great spell, and so 6 power for 5 and turns on 1/1 synergies. It's one of the best uncommons in Obzon.
I wouldn't be surprised if this maybe is, I don't want to go out on that ledge and say it's the best uncommon in the set, but I mean, look what it's just done in this game. There's a 5/5 and the morph is a 3/3.
Yeah.
For Darwin to attack this turn, well, he can't attack this turn. He's just going to pass the turn back over to Frank.
It's hard to call something the best card in the set that's 3 colors because that's just a weakness of itself, but it certainly is up there on power level. There's this whole cycle of uncommons, actually, which Armament Core is a part of. You see Armament Core, Mardu, Rough Rider, Bear's Companion, those ones. All of them are very good. This one may be the best out of the cycle.
Frank's going to gain another life here. He's going to push himself up to 13. He's done a nice job of stabilizing. He's just going to pass the turn back. I do believe that the long game does favor him. And this is exactly how he does want things to go. Yes, again, his second Mauler is in the graveyard, so he'll have to find another way to win. But things are looking pretty good for the 2-time Grand Prix champion.
And if you had any question as to what Frank thought about this format, you just have to look at the kind of cards he's main decking. He is main decking both a Rakshasa's Secret and a Bitter Revelation, which makes me think that Frank is gearing up for the 5-color Mirror. Those are cards that are very slow but very card advantagey.
It's a swarm of blood flies there for Kastle. Again, no attacks in the ground. And what I think we're going to see a lot of in this format, Matthias, as Frank is going to do a little bit of unmorph action here. It's going to be an Obzon guide. That's a 4/4 lifelinker. It's actually a 5/5 because of the counter. Is the skies is where you want to be. Because tying up the ground seems very easy for all decks.
Well, that's something I've actually been really impressed with, is how good some of these flyers have been when I've been playing sealed. Actually, even cards like Scaldkin that don't look very good have done more damage than I ever really would have expected them to do when I've seen them in play.
See if Frank wants to get maybe a little bit more aggressive now, as he does have that 5/5 lifelinker out there, and looks like it's a difficult time for Kastle to do any blocking. Skarren will start by tapping 3 mana here in main phase 1. See what spell he wants to cast. Looks like he's got some options. Again, the winner of Grand Prix Charlotte at the time, the largest Grand Prix. There's an Arc Lightning. Also did win at Grand Prix Philadelphia as well, beating Reed Duke in the finals. Perhaps you've heard of him. Arc Lightning is going to deal 2 damage to the Swarm Bloodflies, 1 damage to the Morph. And now he'll swing with both creatures. He's feeling pretty confident right now, and it's hard to argue.
The 1 damage to the Morph is an interesting play. I'll be interested to see what his follow-up is. Normally you'd expect that just to go at Darwin, for example.
There's a land at number 4. And there's the Heart Piercer, so he's going to get that off the table.
Yeah, post-combat Mardu Heart Piercer gets an Inoc tracker.
The Heart Piercer seems like a premier uncommon as well. Really, really good card.
Yeah, I mean, there's a situation that happens a lot where if you're on the play, you play a Morph, they play a Morph, and if you are playing red, you can just attack, and if they don't trade, the Heart Piercer just completely blows them out.
I think the thing too is it's the threat of the Heart Piercer being in their deck too. There's no guarantee they have it, of course, but I think it's something that you actually have to weigh in to your decision-making process of, well, what happens if he does have the Heart Piercer and kills my Morph? It's a disaster, so maybe I'm just supposed to block.
Completely agree. And now Frank is behind by so much because Darwin's behind because Frank has a 5-power lifelinker here.
Yeah.
When you are these 2-color aggro decks that are trying to tempo people out, to sneak under these 5-color decks, I think Obzon Guide is among the cards that you least want to see on the other side.
I have to agree with you there. I think that Obzon Guide is one of the wards that you just do not want to play against. You see Kastle's going to play Debilitating Injury. Now he's going to cast Crackling Doom. So this is a nice exchange here for Darwin because that's actually going to get the guide off the table because that's the biggest creature out there.
Yeah, engineered that way. And Darwin correctly identifies that Obzon Guide, he cannot afford to let that hit him again.
Yeah, it's got to go. So Crackling Doom will take care of that. Of course, Skarren will take 2 damage in the exchange as well, as the Doom does deal 2 damage to each opponent. Don't have a great look at what's in Skarren's hand, but what we do know is that he can attack pretty confidently here, so that's exactly what he will do. An attack for 3, 4, 5, and 6 points of damage. Make it 5, pardon me.
Yeah, and so while Darwin did get Obzon Guide off the board, and which was really important for him, there is the problem that he's behind on life, and he's behind on power on the board right now.
Here comes the Master of Pearls in for 2. Let's see what the follow-up is. Can he get himself back into the game?
Yeah, he just needs some sort of wall, some sort of blocker. And this is where the 0/5s of the format have all been actually really good cards. Darwin, I think, has an even better answer, though.
That's not bad.
Yeah, Unyielding Krumar is just the right size for this board, provided Frank has nothing.
Frank's going to untap and take a draw here. Looks like he just has 2 cards now. Of course, the Krumar can get first strike, so it can win in combat against both the creatures that are on the table right now for Skarren.
Yeah. This could, in theory, if it works out, stop Skarren's attacks. It does not give Darwin leeway to attack on his side either, so it just creates a board stalemate.
Frank has a suspension field.
Yeah, and there'll be none of that. And that'll put Darwin down to 3.
Yep, another attack here for 5. Suspension field, pretty timely. You get an exile target creature with toughness 3 or greater. It's kind of some weird text there. You think of that Oblivion Ring effect, you can just take care of anything. Journey to Nowhere and all that good stuff that we've seen over the years in Magic.
Well, it's interesting. Normally, when you see cheap 2-mana removal, you expect to be looking at Last Breaths or things that deal with small creatures. But between cards like Disdainful Stroke and Suspension Field in this set, there actually are a lot of 2-mana answers to expensive cards instead. So there actually is punishment for playing big things, which is, I think, one of the more interesting parts about playing limited in this set.
Now that was Darwin's plan to stabilize, was that Krumar, but that was taken care of from the suspension field. So Frank will continue to attack on here. Not sure if he's afraid of a card like a Kill Shot. It doesn't look like he is.
He shouldn't be too scared of Kill Shot. Maybe, yeah, Swift Kick is a possibility. That would fog for a turn.
I have to imagine that Kastle does have something here, so he will make a move, and it does look like it is a Swift Kick. I like the name of that card.
It is a 3-for-1, though.
Yeah.
The kick, the Master Pearls, and the injury all traded for the Armament Core.
Target creature you control gets +1/+1 to end turn, and fights target creature that you don't control. So it's an expensive trick, but it did enough to keep Kastle alive. Let's see if he's got a follow-up here. He's going to tap 3 mana. And it's a morph. What that is anybody's guess.
Yeah, he did get rid of the 3/3, so he could actually go to 1 here. Most of the high-impact morphs cost 5 to flip over.
Skarren's going to reach for the mana. I didn't know if he was going to tap all of it, as he is kind of reaching for it in an odd manner. Seems like he wants to use it all, which would terrify me if I was in Darwin Castle's seat. Here's the attack. Any blocks to be had? Nope. Kastle just says, I'm going to go down to 1.
Yeah, I would be thinking, oh gosh, is this Empty the Pits, Villainous Wealth? What's about to happen here?
Just a boring old Battle Priest. Nothing too crazy there. There's a creature, though. A creature might just be all that Skarren needs.
Every creature right now is lethal.
But the big question here is, what is Kastle's morph?
Well, he has 2 Ponyback Brigades in his deck, and that's a pretty good one. He drew his own Mardu Heart Piercer for the turn. And I was gonna say, I wonder if he's gonna make this attack.
I like
this is pretty risky.
Yeah. 2 damage is gonna come across. Because this attack looks like, hey, you should block, please. And that's not the case at all. Here is the Heart Piercer, and that will take care of the Avzan Battle Priest. So a good exchange there for Kastle, and all you can do is pass the turn back. Again, we still don't know what his morph is, but it's a good turn nonetheless for the Hall of Famer. Back to Skarren we go.
All it takes is a kill spell from Skarren. And if you look at the morphs that Darwin's playing, there's a reasonable chance this is a Ponyback Brigade. And if you're Skarren, you probably could be thinking the same. You have seen an Inoc tracker out of Kastle, which means you know that he's playing some substandard morphs. Like, if you think about Ponyback Brigade being the best morph and Inoc tracker being one that he's playing, there are a lot of morphs that quality-wise are in between those two. Say, for example, War Behemoth would be one. Maybe even Canyon Lurkers is between those two on quality. So I would expect a greater chance that it's one of those cards.
Got a pretty good look at what it is now. It's a Watcher of the Roost. So Darwin's going to reveal a white card.
Yeah, the Sage Eye Harrier, which is actually great right now.
And see, that's another thing I just love about the format, right? Sage Eye Harrier is a really hard card to evaluate. It's a 1/5 flyer.
For 1 more mana than Coastline Chimera.
Yeah.
It's a really not efficient at doing anything.
Yeah, it's like a bad morph. It's a 1/5 flyer, but it is a card that does hold down the skies. And the air is where a lot of decks have been going. We've been watching as ways to get through damage. Ground stalls seem like they're going to happen a lot. So actually having a way to block something in the air in a 1/5 flyer, that's probably better than we all think it is. It's going to come down right now.
All the X5s have just been so good in this set. They've really outperformed expectations.
So Castle's just going to play it face up, I suppose. No reason to morph it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this thing costs a ton when you morph it.
He did have enough mana. He could do 3 and 4. He does have 7 mana in play, so if he wanted to make that play, he certainly could. He could also play it face down. Hey, it's another morph. It's not the Harrier.
Yeah, he could have actually played it face down. That would give the potential. No, I don't have a good. I was going to come up with a good reason of how you can do some double block tricks there and get them to order blockers in a really strange way.
Oh, so here,
it's Ruthless Ripper. When he's the anti-Warden of Watcher of the Roost. When he flips up, a player loses 2 life.
Yep. So Castle's going to go back down to 1.
Yeah, and he showed Rakshasa's secret. That's the mind rot of the set. Darwin will discard 2 and Frank mills 2. He gets a swamp. Not much there.
Yep. Frank is going to mill a couple of cards. Nothing too great there. And we can't forget that the Ruthless Ripper does have Death Touch.
Right.
Pretty good morph there, actually. I like that card a lot.
I think the entire cycle of free morphs are very good.
Yeah.
Ruthless Ripper may be my favorite one of that cycle as well because of his ability to trade with anything. And in a set with all these really large creatures, Death Touch is a great ability to have.
I like Horde Ambusher quite a bit. Makes so a creature can't block. I've been a fan of that card in the limited games that I have played.
Probably my favorite is Dragon Eyes Savants.
Get a little peek at the hand.
Just the 0/6.
You love toughness.
Every time you walk over to a table and you see a guy with a Dragon's Eye Prophets with a debilitating injury on it, you just have to think, that guy had a really good play happen.
Yeah. Here's an attack for 2 in the air. Skarren's going to go down to 8, it looks like. Frank will untap. Who can draw better in this game right now? And Kastle is barely hanging on at 1 life.
I mean, he's been dead to a removal spell for quite a few turns here. And when your opponent's playing 5 color, there's a good chance that they have some removal spells.
Skarren going to go up to 9 after playing that Scoured Barrens. The black-white dual land at common in this set. Kastle will draw a card. He's going to come in for 2 more. Skarren's going to go down to 7. Has either player drawn a relevant spell yet is the question. And 2 copies of Ponyback Brigade in Castle's deck would be a pretty good draw right now, I think.
Any of those would be very good at pushing a couple damage across.
Skarren going to play another land, just plays a Plains, passes the turn back.
Skarren has a lot of good draws of his own in here as well, though. He has a copy of Treasure Cruise in his deck right now, which would be, I believe, just a 1-mana play.
Yeah, or at least close to it. Here's an attack for 2 in the air. Skarren's down to 5.
That is if he actually has a blue mana source yet, despite, I just assumed with all these duels that he had a blue, but upon looking, I actually don't think he has blue mana.
It looks like he may have a Nomad Monastery out there, or Nomad Outpost.
That's it, yeah, but that's the Mardu land.
Yeah, that's the Mardu land. That's not the Ajeskai one.
No, he doesn't have blue mana, so just kidding. He does have he is playing blue for a Treasure Cruise.
Okay.
Had 2 of them in his pool.
There's just a morph.
The other blue card is the Glacial Stalker you see on top of his graveyard, but that one's acceptable because it's also colorless.
How does he not have blue mana? That's
I don't know, like I said,
very
I just
strange.
assumed with 5 dual lands in play.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah. 5 duels, like 3, maybe 4 kinds of basics.
There's the attack. It's a little bit risky when there's a morph down there, but Skarren's down to 3. Here's the Mardu Skull Hunter,
But
the Raid Trigger.
There's the battlefield tapped. This isn't actually a blocker. He's going to have something else here to not die on the counter swing.
Oh, looks like he has a Bring Low, does Kastle. That's the removal spell.
If he casts this on Frank's turn, there's some danger of a pump spell, but there's some upside. If he can get Frank to attack and then bring low and block, then Darwin has the leeway to swing back for lethal. He cuts a turn off Frank's clock.
It's 1 less draw step. And see, for Kastle, you see he's giving this a lot of thought if he should cast it now or later as he rearranges the mana. 4 in the middle. Now he's tapping it for the Bring Low. It's a really tough decision. Do I cast it now or do I cast it later? Do I try to entice an attacker? I need to get this off the table because I don't want to get ruined by a pump spell. This looks like he's going to cast it now. He's going to target the Ruthless Ripper. So get the smallest creature off the battlefield too.
Well, I think if Frank swings, Darwin can block just to have the creatures bounce off any of the creatures that are not Ruthless Ripper.
Skarren draws a mystery card for the turn. Again, he is sitting at 3. 3 power in the air for Kastle right now. All Skarren can do is pass the turn back. Again, we don't know what that morph is just yet.
I mean,
it could still be a trap.
Has Darwin done it as he turned the corner here? This is quite the improbable comeback for him.
He's been at 1 for a handful of turns now. His draw for the turn, I believe, was one of his 2 ponyback brigades. He doesn't really need that now. All he needs to do is try to attack for a lethal, and it might be good to go.
I mean, ponyback brigade gives him a wealth of blockers. The danger being is that Frank's morph is a flyer of any sort.
And everybody's going to come in. This morph is Abomination of Gadul, and that is going to do it.
Yeah, it was blue. And
It
Frank
was blue, and he
flip
couldn't flip it over. So Darwin Kastle, the Hall of Famer, is up a game here over 2-time limited Grand Prix champion Frank Skarren, as these players are going to go into the sideboard. Both players got a very good look at each other's decks there. Long game.
Long game, one that typically would favor a 5-color deck such as Frank's. But remember, one of the things I said before that was distinct about his deck is despite the fact that it's 5 colors, it doesn't have the game-ending bombs you'd expect it to. He's just playing 5 colors for a lot of value. So, there are these cards like Armament Core, Obzon Guide, Abomination of Gadul, those sorts of things. It really isn't that, you were kind of waiting for him to draw some game-breaking rare, and it never happened.
Taking a look at Darwin's deck here as he will continue to sideboard. A lot of cards I actually like in his deck. He's got a copy of Hostilities hiding out over here. He has a Master of Pearls, which you saw him play face-up on turn 2. He's got a Debilitating Injury, Great Removal spell in this format, 2 copies of Mardu Skullhunter, a Murderous Cut. So it looks like he's got some pretty decent removal here. He's also got an Arc Lightning, a copy of Bring Low. We saw the Mardu Heart Piercer, that Flame Tongue Kavu-esque effect. 2 copies of Ponyback Brigade, as you mentioned, a Mardu Rough Rider as well, a Crackling Doom, which we saw cast in that game. So it looks like a pretty good Mardu deck. First time I think we've seen one.
Yeah, we've seen a couple other Mardu decks, but I do like the curve on this one an awful lot. He has a good amount of removal here when you look at cards like Murderous Cut, Crackling Doom, and then he does have the Ponyback Brigades. His creature quality is very high.
Some pretty good mana, too. He's got the Windscarred Crag. That's the red-white dual land. He's got a Scoured Barrens. That's a black-white one. Stand-Step Citadel. That's, of course, the Obzon Tri-land, but it is a black-white land in this deck. And then Bloodfell Caves is the black-red one, so He's got good mana.
It's got basically all 3 of the Obzon dual land, of the Mardu dual lands.
Yeah, it's a pretty good-looking Mardu deck here for the Hall of Famer. For Skarren's deck, you did mention, he's got a lot of different colors of mana here. This is the full 5. I think what was tough for him is that his Sagu Mauler died so early in that game. That would be the way that I think he'd close that game out in most cases.
Sagu Mauler was pretty good, and it was definitely... he was looking for a card that could end the game, and that was a card that could have done it had it not died so early. At the same time, he did need it in that versatile role. Darwin was aggroing him out pretty efficiently, so... that is another reason you play the cards that way.
Keru Lich Lord, another card that he does have in his deck as well. You see Matt Costa walking away behind Darwin Kastle with the slip in his hand, so it looks like he's moved on to 4-1, as I did watch him actually lose a backup feature match a little bit earlier in the day.
The cool part about this 5-color deck from Frank's side is that he has a lot of sideboarding options if he wants them. And he can really adapt to what his opponent is playing. You see cards like Gurmag's Swiftwing is in his board. That's a card that's not particularly good, but it is a flying first striking with 1 power. That takes care of both Watcher of the Roost and Mardu Skullhunter, cards that he knows to be in Darwin's deck. He's playing enough white where he could board in some Jeskai Students to help shore up his early game if he wants. He could really tailor his deck toward this matchup, and I'll be interested to see how he does that.
Game number 2 going to be underway here in just a moment between Darwin Kastle, the Hall of Famer, and 2-time limited Grand Prix champion Frank Skarren. He does have an invite for a Pro Tour this year. I did ask him a little earlier yesterday if he was going to head to Honolulu like the rest of his team. And he said, you know what, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., for the invite, the next Pro Tour, as he enjoys Modern quite a bit, and he likes an affinity strategy.
Sure, so that makes a lot of sense.
He wants to save his invite. Another player that's actually doing that exact same thing, Alex Magelton. Probably doesn't surprise you too much when it comes to affinity for him.
No, he probably would want a chance to play affinity at the Pro Tour. And yeah, if you do have the silver invitation, you can spend it at any one of the Pro Tours.
Scoured Barrens is where Kastle will start, so he's at 21 right away. Skarren is going to play the black-red duel. Of course, that is Bloodfell Cave, so both players sitting at 21. Again, not unusual for this format.
Now, Frank chose to put Darwin on the play for that game too, which is good to note here. We discussed a little about that last round, different play styles as to whether or not you can play or draw. Frank's deck certainly one that wants to draw. The question would be, how badly does he think Darwin's deck wants to be on the play? And while he saw an aggressive strategy from Darwin, it wasn't exactly an aggro strategy.
You know what's kind of interesting about that decision is Kastle's going to play a morph. Both players picked up the information that, hey, I have a Mardu Heart Piercer, and so do you. So is there, does that weigh into the decision to play or draw first? Where that card, of course, when you're going first, your opponent plays a morph, you play a morph, you attack, and then you get to kill their creature because of the raid trigger.
I think it just affects the play of the game. I mean, if you get in that situation, I think you just block, you just trade your morphs. But now that you know that both players have one, makes you want to do that a lot more. Granted, Darwin does not have red mana just yet.
Not yet. Skarren's got red, white, and black mana, but he did not have a play on turn 3. Kastle's going to attack here with his morph for 2.
And it's a Sage Eye Harrier. I'm wondering what... Frank has some sort of spell for it. See what it is.
Just a card like a kill shot. He's actually got a Mardu Charm.
And Frank's going to get him pretty good here. Mardu Charm deals 4 to a creature, but I believe this morph is Sage Eye Harrier. So if Darwin wants, he can actually just flip over his creature here.
Yeah, you see Kastle is taking a look at the Mardu Charm, and of course the mode that Frank is selecting here is putting 2 1/1 warriors into play, and they'll have first strike until end of turn. So Frank says, I need some warriors somewhere to try to block this morph.
Not as
combat.
Badly blown out as if he tried to kill it with damage, but I do think we'll see what the morph is. If it's the Sage Eye Harrier, Darwin can just eat one of these creatures.
Yeah. And there it is. You get a good look at it. Kastle's taking a look at the Sage Eye Harrier. That's a 1/5. He's going to unmorph here. And he says, let's get that thing out of here. I think that's the best the Sage Eye Harrier has ever been as far as beating a creature in combat.
Yeah, he's good at doing that trick where he survives a removal spell. He's good at eating Jeskai Wind Scouts, and otherwise he just bounces off creatures all the time.
It's an attack for 1 here from Skarren. So both players are going to go back down to their original life totals of 20. Let's see what the follow-up here is for Frank. It'll be a morph. Does he have a tap land to make it a good turn? Yes, he does. Windscarred Crag, he's going to go back up to 21. So Kastle will untap his 4 lands. He'll draw. Again, no red source just yet. Didn't find one either. Picked up a copy of Mardu's Skull Hunter.
Yeah, so a little short on colors here. See if he can keep his aggressive strategy going. See Mardu Rough Rider as well in his hand. That card on curve can be a huge beating.
Yeah, that card's looked that good every time I've seen it so far this weekend.
That card's real scary.
Yeah. There's a simple attack for 1. It's going to put Skarren back down to 20. You see there's also a War Behemoth, the 3/6 in Kastle's hand. Looks like that's what he wants to maybe play as his morph. He's going to consult the grip here. Again, he's looking at a bunch of red cards. He says, all right, actually, let me play this red card down as a morph. This is what makes morphs so powerful.
Yeah, it is a red morph. The red morphs he has are Inoc Tracker and Canyon Lurkers.
Neither of those cards, to me, are all that exciting. I think that the Tracker, because it has first strike, gets the better of the 2.
So I'm going to go the other way. I originally hated Canyon Lurkers because even when morphs fight, I unmorph him and he's a 5/2, and then I still trade. That's awful.
Yep.
But the unmorphs for 4, and the fact that you can unmorph for 4, I've actually found to have pretty decent utility. You just swing, they say no blocks, I'm like, all right, 5 ya. And that's a good enough exchange that I've actually been happy with Canyon Lurkers.
Well, here's a Bring Low, so 3 damage is going to get dealt to that morph, and I believe it is Canyon Lurkers that's going to bite the dust. So your favorite morph creature is now in the graveyard, and here's an attack for 3.
Do I love those vanilla 5/2s.
Well, if my vanilla 5/2s get targeted by Bring Low, I'm actually pretty happy.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a good exchange for my mediocre creature. There's a Forest there for Skarren before he does pass the turn back.
And there's the mountain Darwin's looking for. Wealth of options here. Just enough mana for the Mardu Rough Rider. But he's behind in the race, but I think because of Sage Eye Harrier, he still has control over the race, and I would imagine we'll see the 5/4.
Yeah, he can just slow down if he'd like. Now, he also has a copy of Ponyback Brigade in his hand, too. So how he wants to play this turn will be interesting. He's going to start by attacking for 1. He's going to put Skarren back down to 20. There's a mountain. And now he's got the Heart Piercer. So he can play this, take care of that. And there goes the Abomination of Gadul.
Once again, to note, Frank on all of his colors, with the exception of blue.
Yeah, 2 games in a row. So he's having some Again, it's kind of weird to say he's having color issues when he has 4 of his 5 colors, but he is having color issues.
Well, maybe not anymore, right? The blue card's gone.
Yep.
We'll see.
Frank probably doesn't have a great attack here with this warrior. We'll see how he wants to play it on this turn.
A lot of positional play going on right now. If you think about it, Darwin only has 3 power on the board to Frank's 1. Life totals are 20 and 17. It's all about establishing control.
Oh, there's the suspension field. Frank says, I want to get this out of here.
It's a very aggressive suspension field on Mardu Heartpiercer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Frank being a little aggressive with his removal in this game, just kind of forcing through small points of damage. You know, he's just getting 1 and through. Kastle's at a relatively healthy 16. Frank is going to play that Nomad Outpost before passing the turn back. Still without blue mana. You know, what is he accomplishing what he wants to? Is he using the removal a little bit early in this game? We'll see. Because Kastle has just now picked up his 3rd color of mana. And presumably that means that his hand is fully turned on now.
He has Mardu Skull Hunter, War Behemoth, Ponyback Brigade, Swarm of Bloodflies, and Mardu Rough Rider. So the mana costs on those are pretty unwieldy. It's a 5, a 5, a 5, a 6, and a 2. 2 seems nice, except that you can't play 2 with anything else there. So every card in his hand costs him his whole turn right now.
This is a good way to spend your whole turn.
They're great cards, especially Mardu Rough Rider.
Get in for 1, play the Rough Rider, pass the turn back, make Skarren answer that. Maybe he wishes he had the suspension field now. Skarren going to play a Swamp. Let's see what he can come up with on this turn. He's starting to get under the gun a little bit now. He's at a very high life total in 19, and he's going to attack. This is my kind of magic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he has something. I like these kind of attacks.
1-1
when you're
into
behind,
a 5-4.
just start attacking. Just start attacking.
I could watch that all day.
Maybe he's triggering Raid. Maybe he has Awaken the Bear. His deck doesn't seem like the kind of deck that would play Awaken the Bear.
Maybe he has nothing at all.
Maybe he has nothing.
Windscarred Crag was the draw. Rough Rider's going to make it to the Warrior token, can't block, no problem there. 5 + 1 is 6. Skarren's going to go down to 13. Well, let's see what Kastle can put together here on this turn. Again, he did draw a Windscarred Crag. That's going to come and play tap, but he's got the mana necessary to kind of do his thing now. Swarm of Bloodflies isn't a bad way to spend the turn either.
Swarm of Bloodflies is an interesting card. It's a 2/2 flyer for 5, which is way below the curve you want, but it is this insurance policy. They either have to kill the Swarm of Bloodflies, they basically have to kill it right away. So in a sense, it protects your other creatures.
He's going to go with the Ponyback Brigade.
Yeah, Ponyback can be cast on 5. Can be. That's actually 6 to cast.
Yeah, it's actually 6 to cast, so he won't be able to play that one.
Right, it's 5 to unmorph.
Yeah. And what that
and
is
from there comes the confusion.
Yeah, and what that's part of the confusion, of course, and just a new format.
Right.
Too. So seeing that mistake, I'm surprised we haven't seen it happen a little more often today, honestly. Now for Darwin, it's a little bit awkward because, you know, if he were to play a morph, I think Frank knows what it is, and now Frank actually has that information.
He'd have a good idea.
Yeah. Actually, this is the perfect time to play the War Behemoth face down.
Just look sheepishly, put it face down.
Yeah.
That's a sweet play. You could go War Behemoth face down and Mardu Skull Hunter.
Yeah.
Now you can get 2 spells in 1 turn. He does have a 6th land in his hand.
But it's the Crag.
It's the Windscarred Crag.
Yeah. And it's going to come into play tapped, so.
Alternatively, he could just play the Bloodflies. So we'll see which one he decides to do.
All right, he's going to go with the Skull Hunter. He's going to go with the 1/2 punch, I imagine. Skull Hunter is going to come and play tap. Skarren's going to have to discard a card, so there goes the Plains. Maybe Frank is just flooding out here.
Starting to look that way.
And now Kastle's going to play a morph, and it is
And
actually
his
the
War
Behemoth. Kind of funny. There's a Crag, going to gain a life. See if Frank can see through this. The big question now, does Frank have a card like End Hostilities?
I don't believe he has a sweeper in his deck. He said he's 5 colors, but not for the high impact cards you'd expect.
And when talking to Frank, he said he wasn't in love with his deck. He said, I got some powerful stuff. I've got a Seismic Mauler and a handful of other cards. My deck's not great. I've got good enough mana to play all 5 colors. So let's see what this is. Well, this is the Sultai Scavenger, and this is going to be for full cost. 3/3 flyer for 6 mana.
And this is where Mardu Rough Rider's really going to shine.
Yep.
Remember, he makes it so a guy can't block. That probably will be Sultai Scavenger.
Kastle going to slide some mana around here. He's still got that Swarm Bloodflies and Ponyback Brigade in his hand.
Yeah, he's going to play it pre-combat so that if Frank trades the Soldier token with the Mardu Skull Hunter, then he'll be disincentivized from doing that.
I like this. This is essentially a free counter on the Swarm Bloodflies, you would imagine.
Yeah, it actually has 2 counters if that trade happens, because it triggers on both players' creatures.
Rough Rider's going to make it so the Scavenger can't block, and as you mentioned, if the Skull Hunter gets trades with the Warrior token, that's 2 counters on the Swarm Bloodflies. That becomes a 4/4 flyer basically for 5 mana. That's an Air Elemental. You know, we like Air Elementals in limited Magic.
They have a history of being pretty good.
Yeah.
And there you have it. Bloodflies up to 4. Frank takes 8 here, and this may just be a lethal board.
Skarren's going to untap. This is the second time that I have covered a match with Mardu Rough Rider, and it has impressed me quite a bit.
Well, Frank hit his blue mana that turn. He finally hit an island.
Right on time.
It's a little... Maybe he has Treasure Cruise? He has 2 in his pool. 1 in the deck.
I don't know if Treasure Cruise is the card he's looking for right now. Now, he's tapping 6 mana, so clearly he's found something that he likes. Let's see what this is. All right, well, there's the Keru Lich Lord. Castle's going to take a look, and we will, of course, do the same. This is a unique card. It has a lot of text. It kind of just unearths something a little bit at random. You know, you can pay 2 and a black to begin your upkeep. If you do return a creature card at random from your graveyard to the battlefield, it gains Flying, Trample, and Haste, and you exile the card at the beginning of your next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, you exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So as you get into a long game, this card can dominate a game. But it's not really great, I think, at catching you up in a game.
It's the source of a lot of burn, which is kind of interesting because it's not what Sultai is necessarily in the market for. That's why I think this guy may be a little weaker than you would expect, but his ability certainly is powerful.
So with Skarren at 5, now this turn's a little bit different too here for Frank because he's at 5, but last turn he only had 1 mana available. This turn he has 2, and 2 mana actually represents a lot of different things. You know, Feat of Resistance, for example, would be a pretty nice one here.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice plays. Feat of Resistance really is the one that would get Darwin, but he doesn't have time. I don't think he wants to play around it. He's going to swing, makes the falter, and that'll be it.
Yep. Darwin Kastle, the Hall of Famer, is going to win this match over 2-time Grand Prix champion Frank Skarren, 2 games to 0. And for Darwin, his Mardu deck actually looks pretty potent.